The wind howled like an angry wolf outside Lena's windows. At 58, she had seen plenty of winter storms blow through this small town, but this one had a mean bite to it. The weather people on TV had warned about it for days, calling it the worst blizzard to hit the area in 15 years. Lena had stocked up on canned goods, filled her bathtub with water, and made sure her old wood-burning stove was ready to go. Good thing, too, because just as the evening news was wrapping up, the power went out with a sad little flicker. The TV died, the fridge hummed to silence, and the only light came from the warm glow of the fire. "Well, I guess it's just you and me tonight," Lena said to her old tabby cat. Chester, who was curled up on the armchair beside her. He blinked slowly at her, unimpressed by the storm or the power outage. Lena had been a nurse for 30 years before retiring 3 years ago. Her husband, Frank, had passed away around the same time, leaving her alone in the modest 3-bedroom house they had bought together when they were young and full of dreams. The house sat on the edge of town, with a good acre of land separating her from her closest neighbors, the Thompsons, who were nice enough but kept to themselves. She wrapped a thick quilt around her shoulders and shuffled to the kitchen to make some tea on the stovetop. The gas still worked, thankfully. As the water began to boil, she glanced out the window at the swirling snow. The wind was pushing it sideways, creating white waves that crashed against her porch railing. Her driveway had disappeared under a thick blanket of white. "Nobody should be out in this," she muttered to herself as she poured hot water over a tea bag. That's when she heard it, a knock at the door. Not a gentle tap, but the desperate pounding of someone in trouble. Lena froze, the steaming mug in her hand. She wasn't expecting anyone, and in this weather, her first thought was maybe the Thompsons needed help. But they had a generator and a 4-wheel drive truck. Who else would be out in a storm like this? The pounding came again, more urgent this time. Chester raised his head, ears perked toward the sound. Lena set down her tea and moved cautiously toward the door. Living alone had taught her to be careful, especially at night. She flicked on the porch light before remembering the power was out. "Old habits, who's there?" she called through the door, one hand on the baseball bat she kept in the umbrella stand. Frank had always insisted she keep it there just in case. "Please help," a man's voice deep and rough around the edges. "Our truck broke down. My wife and kid are freezing out here." Lena hesitated. It could be a trick. But what kind of person would use a child as bait? And in this storm? "How many of you?" she asked. 3, me, my wife, and our little girl. She's sick with fever. "Please, ma'am, we're desperate." Something in the man's voice, the raw fear that only comes when your child is in danger, made Lena's decision for her. As a nurse, she had heard that tone too many times to ignore it. She unbolted the door and opened it a crack, keeping the chain on. The blast of cold air made her gasp. But what truly took her breath away was the sight before her. A massive man with a full beard stood on her porch, snow covering his shoulders and the leather vest he wore despite the freezing temperature. Behind him, a woman held a small bundle wrapped in what looked like a motorcycle jacket. Only a tiny face peeked out, flushed with fever against the pale night. And there, clear as day on the man's vest, was the patch that made her blood run cold. Hell's Angels. The notorious motorcycle club that featured in crime shows and newspapers. The woman behind him looked up, her eyes red from crying or the cold or both. "Please," she whispered, and Lena could see her trembling. The little girl let out a weak cough, and something shifted inside Lena. 30 years of nursing hadn't trained her to turn away from a sick child, no matter who the parents were. She closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it wide. "Get in here, all of you. Before you freeze solid," she said, stepping aside. The family rushed in, bringing the winter with them. Snow melted on her floor as the man stomped his boots on the welcome mat. Thank you," he kept saying, his voice thick with relief. "I'm Doug. This is my wife Tina and our daughter Lily." Close up, Doug was even more intimidating. 6-foot-something with arms thick as tree trunks, covered in tattoos that peeked out from under his sleeves. But his eyes were soft when they landed on his daughter, and his hands gentle as he helped his wife unwrap the child. "What happened to your truck?" Lena asked, leading them toward the fire. "Slid off the road about a mile back," Doug explained. "Engine died and my phone's dead too. Lily's been fighting a fever since yesterday, and when the truck wouldn't start..." He trailed off, the fear of what might have happened hanging unspoken in the air. Lena nodded toward the couch. Sit her down here, close to the fire. I used to be a nurse. Let me take a look at her. Tina carefully placed Lily on the couch. The girl couldn't have been more than 3, with rosy cheeks that would have been cute if they weren't flushed with fever. Her eyes were glassy and her breathing came in short, quick bursts. Lena pressed her palm against the child's forehead. She's burning up. How long has she been like this? Started yesterday, Tina said, her voice scratchy with worry. Got worse this morning. We were trying to get to the clinic in Riverside when the storm hit. Lena's nurse instincts took over. She fetched her medical kit from the bathroom, old habits from her working days that she never broke. She checked Lily's temperature with a thermometer. 102.8, she announced. High, but not dangerous yet. Let's get her fever down and keep her hydrated. Doug hovered nearby, his massive frame somehow making her living room feel small. You got a phone we could use? Need to call a tow truck. Lena pointed to the landline on the wall. Power's out, but the phone still works, though I doubt any tow trucks will be coming out in this weather. Doug tried anyway, calling 3 different companies before hanging up with a frustrated sigh. Earliest they can come is tomorrow afternoon when the road's clear. The realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They were stuck here. All of them, until morning at least. Lena could see the worry on their faces. Look, she said, I've got plenty of room. You folks can stay the night, head out when it's safe. Tina looked at her with surprise. You'd let us stay? You don't even know us. The unspoken truth hung between them. Most people saw the Hells Angels patch and showed them the door. Lena shrugged. I know you've got a sick little girl who needs to be warm and safe tonight. That's all I need to know. Doug's eyes met hers, something like gratitude and surprise mixing in his gaze. Thank you, he said simply. Outside, the Thompsons' porch light flicked on. Through the window, Lena could see Mr. Thompson peering across the yard at her house, probably wondering about the strange truck tracks in the snow leading to her door. Let them wonder, she thought. Some things were more important than what the neighbors might think. Now, she said, turning back to her unexpected guests, let's get this little one some children's Tylenol and a cool cloth for her head. And I bet you 2 could use something warm to drink. As she moved around her kitchen, heating soup on the wood stove and finding clean towels for her guests, Lena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The simple purpose of caring for others in need. Since Frank died and she retired, her days had been quiet, predictable, safe. But safety wasn't always what the soul needed. She watched as Doug gently stroked his daughter's hair, whispering reassurances. Saw how Tina's hands trembled as she helped Lily sip some water. These weren't the hardened criminals from TV. They were just people, scared, cold and grateful for a warm place on a freezing night. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Lena's small house, something unexpected had blown in with it. She didn't know yet if it was trouble or blessing. Maybe both. But as the night settled in around them, she knew one thing for certain. She had done the right thing by opening her door. And sometimes, that was all you could ask for in this life. An hour passed and Lena's living room had transformed. Lily lay on the couch, her fever down a degree thanks to the children's Tylenol Lena kept in her medicine cabinet. The little girl's breathing was still labored, but her cheeks weren't quite as flushed. Tina sat beside her, stroking her hair and singing softly, a mother's worry etched in the lines around her eyes. Doug paced near the window, his large frame casting shadows across the room in the firelight. Every few minutes he'd glance outside as if willing the storm to pass. Soup's ready, Lena announced, carrying a tray from the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just chicken and rice. The gas stove still works, thank goodness. You didn't have to. Tina started, but her stomach growled, betraying her hunger. Nonsense. Can't have guests in my home going hungry. Lena handed her a steaming bowl, especially not when there's a sick child involved. Doug accepted his bowl with a nod. Been a while since anyone called us guests instead of, well, other things. His voice was gruff, but Lena caught the note of gratitude underneath. She watched as he took a spoonful. His tattooed hands, the words "hold fast," spelled across his knuckles, surprisingly gentle as he handled the china bowl. This is real good, he said after a moment. My Frank used to say my chicken soup could raise the dead. Lena smiled at the memory. Never quite managed that, but it does seem to help with the common cold. Your husband? Tina asked gently. Lena nodded. Gone 3 years now. Heart attack while shoveling snow. She gestured toward the window. Winters are the hardest without him. A moment of understanding passed between them. Loss was universal, something that didn't care what patches you wore or what neighborhood you lived in. Your girl been sick long? Lena asked, changing the subject as she checked on Lily again. Started with a runny nose 2 days ago, Tina explained. Then this morning she woke up burning up. Our usual doctor is 3 towns over. We were trying to get to the urgent care when the truck died. I should have checked the antifreeze before we left, Doug muttered, shaking his head. Rookie mistake. You were worried about your daughter, Lena said. Makes you forget things. Still. He set his empty bowl down. Shouldn't have happened. Out with my family in the car. Lena recognized the self-blame in his voice. She'd heard it from countless parents in the hospital waiting room over her years as a nurse. That special kind of guilt that comes when your child is suffering and you couldn't prevent it. Lily's going to be fine, Lena assured them both. Probably just a nasty flu. The medicine will help bring the fever down and rest will do the rest. As if on cue, Lily stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. Mommy? She called weakly. Tina was at her side in an instant. I'm here, baby. How are you feeling? Cold, the little girl whispered. And hot. Lena fetched another blanket from the hall closet, a colorful quilt she had made years ago. This should help with the cold part, she said, tucking it around Lily. The hot part we're working on. Lily's eyes, bright with fever, studied Lena curiously. Who are you? This is Miss Lena, Tina explained. She's letting us stay at her house while the truck gets fixed. Are you a doctor? Lily asked, her small voice scratchy. Lena smiled. Used to be a nurse. Took care of lots of little ones like you. Does that mean I have to get a shot? Worry flashed across the child's face. No shots, Lena promised. Just some medicine that tastes like cherries and lots of rest. Relief softened Lily's features. I like cherries. Smart girl, Lena winked. Now how about I tell you a story while your mom and dad finish their soup? Lily nodded, settling deeper into the blankets. Doug watched from across the room, his expression softening as Lena sat beside his daughter, and began a tale about a brave little fish who saved his family from a storm. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, though his eyes still darted to the window whenever the wind howled particularly fiercely. Outside, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Snow piled against the windows and tree branches scraped against the house like bony fingers. But inside the fire crackled warmly, and for the moment everyone was safe. After her story, Lena checked Lily's temperature again. 101.9, coming down slowly but surely. Thank God, Tina breathed. And thank you. Just doing what anyone would do, Lena replied. Doug made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. Not anyone. Plenty of folks see the vest and shut their doors, even in weather like this. Well, I see a sick child and her worried parents, Lena said firmly. The vest doesn't matter much to me. A flash of light from outside caught her attention. Headlights swept across the living room wall as a vehicle pulled into the Thompsons' driveway next door. Doug tensed immediately, moving to the window. Cops? Probably just my neighbor's son, Lena said, though she wasn't entirely sure. He sometimes checks on them during bad weather. Sure enough, a young man trudged through the snow toward the Thompsons' house. But before he reached the door, he paused, looking toward Lena's house. Even through the swirling snow, she could see him staring at the unfamiliar truck in her driveway. They're going to wonder about your visitors, Lena remarked, more to herself than to Doug. We can leave, he said immediately. Don't want to cause trouble for you. Lena waved away his concern. Nonsense. In this weather. Besides, Lily needs rest. Let them wonder. The young man disappeared into the Thompsons' house, but moments later, Lena saw curtains part as someone peered out toward her home. Small towns. She sighed. Everyone knows everyone's business by sunrise. We know something about that, Tina said with a tired smile. In the club, there's no such thing as privacy. The club? Lena asked, though she had a good idea what Tina meant. The Hells Angels, Doug explained, watching for her reaction. It's not just a vest. It's family, Lena nodded thoughtfully. Frank was in the army. Used to say the same thing about his unit. Said they were closer than brothers. Something shifted in Doug's expression. I was army too. 2 tours in Afghanistan before. He gestured to his vest. Before you found another kind of family, Lena finished for him. Something like that, he agreed. The clock on the mantel chimed 10. Lily had drifted off to sleep again, her breathing easier now. You folks must be exhausted, Lena said. I've got a spare bedroom upstairs. It's not much, but the bed's comfortable. Lily can stay on the couch where it's warm, or she can go up with you. Tina looked at her sleeping daughter. I hate to move her now that she's finally resting. I'll keep an eye on her, Lena offered. Old nurses don't sleep much anyway. Doug and Tina exchanged a look, the silent communication of parents weighing what was best for their child. We couldn't ask you to do that. Doug said, You didn't ask. I offered. Lena stood firm. Go get some rest. I'll wake you if she needs anything. After a bit more convincing, the couple reluctantly agreed. Lena showed them upstairs to the guest room, providing clean towels and a spare toothbrush she kept for visitors. Don't mind the decor, she said, gesturing to the floral wallpaper. Frank always said it looked like a garden exploded in here. That got a genuine laugh from Tina. Perhaps the first of the night. When they were settled, Lena returned downstairs to check on Lily. The girl was sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Lena adjusted the blanket and added another log to the fire. Chester, who had been hiding under the bed since the strangers arrived, finally emerged to investigate. He approached the couch cautiously, sniffing at the unfamiliar child. It's all right, old boy, Lena whispered. They're our guests tonight. The cat seemed unconvinced but settled into his armchair nonetheless, keeping a watchful eye on the sleeping girl. As the night deepened, Lena sat in the rocking chair beside the fire, a book in her lap though she wasn't reading. Instead, she found herself thinking about the strange turns life could take. How this morning she'd been alone as usual, and tonight her quiet home was filled with strangers. A family of bikers, no less. What would her church friends say? Or the ladies from her quilting circle? They'd probably think she'd lost her mind, letting Hell's Angels into her home. But looking at Lily's peaceful face, Lena knew she'd do it again in a heartbeat. Some things transcended labels and patches and small-town judgments. Outside, the wind finally began to ease, the storm spending the last of its fury. Tomorrow would bring sunshine on snow, roads to clear, and neighbors to face. But for tonight, in the gentle glow of the firelight, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that everyone under her roof was safe and warm, unexpected as they might be. Morning arrived with a gentle nudge of sunlight through the frost-covered windows. Lena had dozed off in her rocking chair, a quilt pulled up to her chin. She woke to the sound of quiet whispering and the smell of coffee. She blinked, momentarily confused by the sight of a little girl sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, playing with Chester, who seemed to have overcome his wariness sometime during the night. Good morning? Doug's deep voice came from the kitchen doorway. He held a steaming mug in his hands. Hope you don't mind. Figured you could use some coffee after keeping watch all night. Lena straightened in her chair, smoothing down her silver hair. Not at all. How's Lily feeling? As if in answer, the little girl looked up with a bright smile. Her cheeks still had a touch of pink, but the glassy fever look was gone from her eyes. My tummy feels better, she announced, stroking Chester behind the ears. And I made a new friend. Chester, normally standoffish with strangers, was purring loudly under her gentle touch. Well, I'll be, Lena chuckled. That old grump usually hides for days when company comes. You must have a special touch, Lily. Doug handed Lena the mug of coffee. Tina's in the shower, if that's okay. Fever broke around dawn. Your medicine worked wonders. Glad to hear it. Lena took a grateful sip of the coffee. It was strong, just the way she liked it. Power back on, I see, Doug nodded. Came back about an hour ago. Roads should be clearing soon. There was a note of something like reluctance in his voice. Lena understood. Strange as it seemed, their unexpected night together had created a bubble of connection. A temporary shelter not just from the storm but from the judgments of the outside world. Once they left her house, reality would return. He'd go back to being a feared biker, and she'd go back to being a widow that neighbors worried about. No rush, she said, rising from her chair with a slight groan as her old joints protested. These old bones aren't made for sleeping upright anymore. You should have woken us, Doug said, frowning. We could have taken shifts. Lena waved him off. Been watching over sick children since before you were born, young man. Some habits are hard to break. In the kitchen, she found that Doug had not only made coffee but had also scrounged up ingredients for breakfast. A plate of slightly misshapen pancakes sat on the counter. "They're not pretty, but they should taste all right," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "Wanted to do something to say thanks." "They look delicious," Lena assured him, touched by the gesture. Tina appeared in the doorway, her hair damp from the shower. She looked younger in the morning light. The worry lines eased from her face. "Lily's fever is completely gone," she reported with relief. "Whatever you did, it worked." "Time and rest," Lena replied. "And a grandmother's remedy or two. Speaking of which." She opened a cabinet and pulled out a jar of honey. "A spoonful of this with a bit of lemon will help with that cough she still has." While they ate breakfast, a comfortable conversation flowed between them. Doug talked about his motorcycle shop where he customized bikes for club members and other customers. Tina shared stories about the charity rides the club organized for the Children's Hospital, where Lily had been born prematurely. "People see the patches and think they know everything about us," she said, cutting a pancake into tiny pieces for Lily. "They don't see the toy drives or the blood donations or the veterans we help. People fear what they don't understand," Lena replied. "And fear makes folks do foolish things like judging books by their covers." A comfortable silence fell as they finished their meal. Lena was about to clear the plates when a dripping sound caught her attention. She sighed, grabbing a pot from under the sink to catch the water leaking from the faucet. "Been meaning to get that fixed," she explained. "Frank used to handle all the plumbing issues. I've watched enough YouTube videos to know I shouldn't try it myself." Doug stood up, rolling up his sleeves. "Mind if I take a look? Least I can do for all your help." "Oh, you don't have to. I want to," he insisted. "Got all my tools in the truck. Been fixing leaks since I was a teenager." Before Lena could protest further, he was out the door, trudging through the snow to retrieve his toolbox. Tina smiled knowingly at Lena. "He needs to feel useful," she explained. "It's how he says thank you when words don't seem enough." Doug returned, snow dusting his shoulders, a large toolbox in hand. He got to work immediately, shutting off the water under the sink and carefully disassembling the faucet. "Just as I thought," he muttered, examining a worn-out washer. "Simple fix. Got a replacement right here." Lena watched in amazement as his large, tattooed hands worked with surprising delicacy, replacing the washer and checking all the connections. "Frank tried to teach me all this," she said. "Never had the patience for it." "My dad was a plumber," Doug replied, tightening a fitting. "Made sure all his kids knew how to fix basic stuff. Said it was our insurance policy against hard times. Smart man." "Yeah, he was." Doug's voice softened with memory. Didn't approve of the club, though. Hadn't spoken to him in years when he passed. Lena sensed the regret in his words. "Families are complicated," she offered. "My own daughter lives out in California, calls on birthdays and Christmas, but that's about it." Doug nodded in understanding. "After my second tour, couldn't really connect with anyone who hadn't been there, you know?" "The club." They got it. "No questions asked." "Frank was the same way after Vietnam," Lena said. "Some hurts run too deep for words." Their eyes met in shared understanding, a bridge forming between their very different lives. The faucet repair complete, Doug turned the water back on. "No more drips. Good as new," he announced with satisfaction. "Been driving me crazy for months," Lena admitted. "Thank you." Around noon the phone rang. It was the tow truck company, saying they could make it out within the hour. The news brought a strange mix of relief and disappointment to the room. While they waited, Tina helped Lena change the sheets in the guest room, and Lily drew a picture of Chester the cat as a thank you gift. Doug disappeared outside again, returning with a snow shovel to clear Lena's walkway and porch steps. "You'll break your neck on these if they ice over," he explained when she protested. From her living room window, Lena noticed Mrs. Thompson watching from next door, phone pressed to her ear. No doubt updating the neighborhood gossip network about Lena's unusual visitors. "Your neighbors seem concerned," Tina remarked, following Lena's gaze. "They mean well," Lena sighed, "but they forget I spent 30 years as an ER nurse. Dealt with all sorts of characters. Takes more than a leather vest to scare me. Still, we don't want to cause trouble for you. Honey, at my age, a little trouble keeps life interesting." The rumble of a truck engine announced the arrival of the tow service. A young man in overalls hopped out, doing a double take at Doug's vest before focusing on the job at hand. The moment had come. Bags were gathered, goodbyes prepared. Lena packed a small container of leftover soup and some medicine for Lily, just in case. At the door, Doug hesitated. I don't know how to thank you properly. You fixed my faucet, Lena reminded him. I'd say we're even. No, we're not even close to even. He pulled out his wallet and removed a business card. This has my cell number. Anything you need, day or night, you call. I mean it. Lena took the card, touched by the gesture. I'll remember that. Tina stepped forward and, to Lena's surprise, wrapped her in a warm hug. Thank you for not judging us, she whispered. And thank you for the cat picture, Lena told Lily, who was looking much better as she bounced on her toes, eager to go home to her own bed and toys. They walked out together into the bright winter day. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine white landscape that sparkled in the sunlight. The tow truck driver was hooking up their truck, glancing curiously at the unlikely group on Lena's porch. You take care of that cough, Lena called to Lily, as Doug lifted her into the cab of the tow truck. I will, the little girl promised. Can we visit Chester again sometime? The question hung in the air, innocent yet complicated. Doug and Tina exchanged a look before Doug turned to Lena. Would that be all right? Maybe bring you dinner some night to say thanks properly? Lena found herself nodding before she'd even thought it through. I'd like that. As the truck pulled away, Lily waving frantically from the window, Lena stood on her porch watching until they disappeared around the bend. The house behind her suddenly felt emptier, quieter than it had before. Chester wound around her ankles, meowing for attention or perhaps missing his new friend. I know, Lena told him, picking him up. They were something else, weren't they? Inside, the faucet didn't drip. The spare room smelled of fresh sheets, and a colorful drawing of a cat was stuck to her refrigerator with a magnet. Small changes, but somehow they made her house feel more like a home than it had in years. She had no idea if she'd ever see the family again. But something told her this wasn't the end of their story, just the beginning of an unexpected friendship that defied all the usual boundaries. 5 days had passed since the storm. Lena's life had settled back into its quiet routine. Morning coffee with Chester, afternoon reading, evening television shows, and the occasional call from her daughter in California. But something had changed. The house felt different somehow, emptier, despite being exactly as it had been before the unexpected guests. Lena found herself glancing at Doug's business card on the refrigerator, right next to Lily's colorful drawing. She'd almost called twice, once when her porch light burned out, leaving her front steps dangerously dark, and again when she thought she heard a strange noise in the basement. Both times she'd put the phone down. They were just being polite with their offer of help, she told herself. No need to bother them. The Thompsons hadn't wasted any time spreading the word about her visitors. At the grocery store the day after the storm, Mrs. Wilson from her church group had cornered her between the canned goods and the baking aisle. Heard you had some rough characters staying over during the blizzard, she'd said, her voice a mixture of concern and barely disguised curiosity. Had a family with a sick child who needed shelter? Lena had replied simply. Nothing rough about helping people in need. Others had been less direct but equally nosy, watching her with sideways glances at the pharmacy or asking roundabout questions at the post office. Lena had lived in this town long enough to recognize the buzz of gossip. She was now the old widow who harbored bikers, a new and mildly scandalous identity that seemed to both worry and fascinate her neighbors. Lena paid it little mind. At her age, other people's opinions had lost much of their sting. Sunday afternoon found her dozing in her armchair, a mystery novel open on her lap, when the first rumble reached her ears. At first she thought it might be thunder, unusual for February but not impossible. But the sound didn't fade. Instead it grew louder, a deep mechanical growl that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Chester's ears perked up. He leapt from his sunny spot on the windowsill and darted under the couch, his preferred hiding place when the mail carrier brought packages to the door. The rumbling grew louder still, now unmistakably the sound of multiple engines. Many engines. Lena set her book aside and moved to the window, pushing back the curtain just enough to peek outside. What she saw made her breath catch. Motorcycles. Not one or two, but dozens filling the street in front of her house. Big, gleaming machines in blacks and chromes and deep reds, their engines thundering in a symphony of controlled power, and astride each one a rider in a leather vest. Hell's Angels. At least 30 of them. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Had Doug gotten into some kind of trouble for helping her? Was this some kind of retaliation from rival gang members? Her mind raced through terrible possibilities, each worse than the last. Through her curtains, she could see the Thompsons standing on their front porch, Mr. Thompson with a phone pressed to his ear. Other neighbors had emerged from their homes as well, staring in disbelief at the motorcycle procession. The lead rider cut his engine, and like a wave, the others followed suit. The sudden silence seemed almost as loud as the roar had been. Lena recognized Doug immediately, his tall frame unmistakable as he removed his helmet and hung it on his handlebars. He said something to the riders behind him, and they formed a loose semicircle in the street facing her house. A few removed saddlebags from their bikes. Others stood at attention, arms crossed over broad chests. Lena's doorbell rang. Her legs felt unsteady as she made her way to the door. Through the peephole, she could see Doug standing on her porch alone. He wasn't wearing his usual scowl. Instead, he looked almost nervous. She unlatched the chain with trembling fingers and opened the door just enough to see him properly. "Doug? What's happening?" "Hey, Lena." His voice was softer than she remembered. "Sorry about all this." He gestured vaguely toward the street behind him. "Didn't mean to scare you." "There are at least 30 bikers in front of my house," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What am I supposed to think?" Doug's weathered face creased with what might have been embarrassment. "It wasn't supposed to be this many. Just a few of us were coming to help out, but once the guys heard the story..." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "Look, can I explain properly? I promise we're not here to cause trouble." Lena hesitated, then opened the door wider. Whatever was happening, she doubted Doug meant her harm. Not after the connection they'd shared during the storm. He stepped inside but remained in the entryway, seeming too large for her small foyer. "Lily's fever came back the day after we left," he began. "Nothing serious, but we had to take her to the doctor. Is she all right?" Concern immediately overrode Lena's fear. "She's fine now. Doctor gave her antibiotics for an ear infection." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "While we were there, I got to thinking about what you said. About your porch steps being icy, and that leaky faucet being just the start of your plumbing troubles." Lena crossed her arms, waiting for him to continue. "So I mentioned to a few club brothers that I wanted to come back and help you out. Fix those steps, check your pipes, maybe chop some firewood for the rest of winter." He ran a hand through his beard. "Next thing I know, everyone wanted in. The whole chapter. Turns out stories about kindness to one of our kids spread fast. All those people are here to help me." Lena couldn't quite believe it. "We took a vote at the club meeting. Decided to adopt you in a manner of speaking." "Adopt me?" Lena repeated, bewildered. Doug's expression softened. "It's something we do sometimes. Find folks who need a hand, usually veterans or their families. We look out for them. Check in regularly. Help with home repairs, groceries, whatever's needed." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is from all of us. Should cover a new heating system before next winter. That old furnace of yours is on its last legs. I could hear it struggling while we were here." Lena stared at the envelope, unable to form words. "You don't have to accept," Doug added quickly, "but it would mean a lot to us if you did. You took care of our family when nobody else would. Now we want to return the favor." Through the open door, Lena could see some of the bikers unloading tools from their saddlebags. Others were carrying bags that looked suspiciously like groceries. A tall woman with a long silver braid was directing traffic, pointing different groups toward the backyard, the porch, the side of the house. "Tina's organizing," Doug explained with a hint of pride. "She's good at that, keeping us all in line." "Where's Lily?" Lena asked, finally finding her voice. "With her grandmother today. She wanted to come, but we thought all this might be a bit overwhelming." He paused. "She did send this, though." From his other pocket, he produced a folded piece of paper. Lena opened it to find another drawing. This time of a stick figure with gray hair standing between two larger figures in what were clearly meant to be leather vests. A small figure stood in front, labeled Lily in wobbly letters. Above them all, the words "My friend Lena" were written in a child's careful print. Something warm unfurled in Lena's chest, melting away the last of her fear. "You really don't have to do all this," she said. But her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "We know," Doug replied simply. "We want to." From outside came a shout. The silver-haired woman, Tina, was waving from the driveway. "Doug!" Need you to look at this wiring before Joe starts on it. Be right there, he called back, then turned to Lena. So what do you say? Will you let us help? Through the window, Lena could see her neighbors watching in disbelief. Mrs. Thompson had her hand pressed to her mouth. Mr. Wilson from across the street was taking photos with his phone. She could almost hear the gossip that would race through town by sundown. For a moment, she imagined closing her door, sending them all away. It would be easier, quieter, less complicated. But then she looked down at Lily's drawing again, at the little family she'd sketched with Lena as part of it. I suppose I could use some help with those porch steps, she said finally, and my pantry's looking a bit empty. Doug's face broke into a grin, the first real smile she'd seen from him. You won't regret this. As he held the door open for her, Lena stepped out onto her porch. The February sun shone brightly, glinting off chrome and leather. Dozens of tough tattooed men and women paused in their activities, turning to look at her. Hey everyone, Doug called out. This is Lena. A chorus of greetings rose up from the group. Some waved tools in the air. Others nodded respectfully. A few of the women stepped forward, introducing themselves with names like Pixie and Bones and Storm. We brought lunch, announced a heavyset man with a gray beard longer than Doug's. Hope you like barbecue. And I've got a peach cobbler in my saddlebag, added a woman with intricate tattoos covering both arms. Family recipe. As Lena stood there, surrounded by leather-clad bikers with tools and food and genuine smiles, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The warm embrace of community, unexpected as it might be. Welcome to the family, Tina said, appearing at her side and slipping an arm around Lena's shoulders. Hope you don't mind the noise. We can be a rowdy bunch. Across the street, Mrs. Thompson was now openly staring, phone still pressed to her ear. Lena found herself laughing, a real, deep laugh that bubbled up from somewhere long forgotten. Let them stare, she said. Sometimes family comes from the most unexpected places. Spring had come early to town, bringing with it chirping birds and tiny green buds on the trees outside Lena's kitchen window. 3 months had passed since that February day, when dozens of motorcycles had lined her quiet street. 3 months since her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. She hummed softly as she pulled a tray of cookies from the oven, chocolate chip with walnuts, Doug's favorite. Through the open window she could hear the steady rhythm of hammering from the backyard, where a handful of club members were putting the finishing touches on her new deck. The old rotting porch had been torn down weeks ago, replaced by a sturdy structure with a gentle ramp instead of steps. Much easier on her knees. The rumble of motorcycles announced more weekend visitors. Saturdays had become unofficial Lena's house days for many in the club. Some came to work on various projects. The deck today, last week it had been repainting her bedroom, before that installing new energy-efficient windows. Others just came to sit and talk, sharing coffee and stories on the front porch swing that Big Joe had built for her. Chester had long since gotten used to the visitors. He now sat expectantly by the door, knowing that someone, usually Pixie with her endless supply of cat treats, would make a fuss over him. Lena set the cookies on a cooling rack and wiped her hands on her apron. The phone rang, her daughter calling from California. Right on schedule. Hey, Beth, she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she poured lemonade into a pitcher. Hi, Mom. How are things? Any more visits from your friends? Beth still couldn't quite wrap her head around her mother's new social circle. They're here now, working on the deck. Should be done today. A pause. Mom, are you sure about all this? I mean, they're Hell's Angels. Don't they have some kind of agenda? Lena chuckled. Their agenda seems to be making sure an old man's house doesn't fall down around her ears, and bringing me more food than I could eat in a year. It's just unusual, Beth persisted. Life gets boring without a little unusual, honey. Lena glanced out the window to where Tina was laying out plates for lunch on the picnic table, another new addition to Lena's backyard. You should come visit. Meet them yourself. Maybe this summer, Beth said, non-committal as always. She'd been saying maybe about visits for years now. After they hung up, Lena carried the lemonade outside. The May sunshine felt good on her face after the long winter. 6 club members were working today, Doug and Tina. Of course, plus Big Joe, Pixie, a quiet young man everyone called Rabbit. and an older member named Gray who'd been with the club since the 70s. Perfect timing, Tina said, taking the picture. We're about ready to break for lunch. Doug climbed down from the deck, wiping sweat from his brow. Deck's almost done. Just need to seal it once the wood dries out a bit more. It's beautiful, Lena told him, admiring the craftsmanship. Frank would have loved it. High praise, Doug said with a smile. He'd heard enough stories about Frank by now to understand the compliment. They gathered around the picnic table, an unlikely group sharing sandwiches and lemonade in the spring sunshine. Conversation flowed easily, jumping from Gray's stories about his glory days riding cross-country, to Pixie's new job at the veterinary clinic, to Rabbit's quiet updates on Lily, who had stayed home today for a dance recital. She made me promise to bring you a slice of cake, Tina told Lena. She said you're missing too many important things. Tell her I'll be at her next recital, Lena promised. Wouldn't miss it for the world. It still amazed her sometimes how quickly these people had become a part of her life. How Doug checked on her several times a week. How Tina brought her groceries without being asked. How Lily now had a special shelf of books and toys in Lena's spare room for her frequent visits. The sound of a car door slamming drew their attention to the driveway. Mrs. Thompson stood there, a covered dish in her hands, uncertainty written across her face. The group at the table fell silent. Mrs. Thompson had been the most vocal about Lena's new friends, making comments at church about dangerous elements and poor judgment. She'd even organized a neighborhood meeting to discuss the situation, though few had attended. I'll handle this, Lena said quietly. Rising from the table, she made her way across the yard, aware of the bikers watching protectively. Hello, Jean, she said, using Mrs. Thompson's first name deliberately. What brings you by? Mrs. Thompson's eyes darted nervously to the group at the picnic table. I made a casserole. Thought you might like some. In all the years they'd been neighbors, Mrs. Thompson had never once brought food over. That's very thoughtful, Lena said, keeping her tone neutral. Would you like to come in? Actually, Mrs. Thompson hesitated, then lowered her voice. Jim fell yesterday, trying to clean the gutters. Doctor says he shouldn't climb ladders anymore, but we can't afford to hire someone. And with the spring rains coming, now Lena understood. She glanced back at the picnic table, where Doug was already rising to his feet, having overheard despite Mrs. Thompson's attempt at discretion. Let me introduce you to my friends, Lena said, gently taking Mrs. Thompson's elbow. I think they might be able to help. The transformation in her neighbor's face as Lena led her to the table, fear giving way to caution, then to cautious relief as Doug offered to take a look at the gutters, was something Lena would treasure for a long time. By late afternoon, half the club was at the Thompsons' house. Doug and Big Joe were on ladders cleaning gutters while Gray inspected the roof for loose shingles. Rabbit, who worked as an electrician, was fixing a faulty porch light that Mr. Thompson had mentioned. Inside, Pixie and Tina were helping Mrs. Thompson organize a decade's worth of medical paperwork, showing her a system that had helped Pixie's elderly father keep track of his medications and appointments. Lena sat with Mr. Thompson on his front porch, watching the activity with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Never thought I'd have a yard full of bikers, he admitted, his voice gruff but grateful. Joan's been scared of them since they started coming around. People fear what they don't understand, Lena replied. I was scared too at first. What changed your mind? Lena thought about that night during the blizzard, about Doug's hands gently stroking his daughter's hair, about Tina's worry and relief, about the simple humanity that had shone through their tough exteriors. I saw them as people, not patches, she said simply. By the time summer rolled around, Saturday gatherings at Lena's had grown to include several neighbors. Mrs. Wilson from church brought her famous potato salad. Mr. Chen from down the street shared vegetables from his garden. Even the mail carrier sometimes stopped by on his day off. The club members took it in stride, teaching Mr. Chen's teenage son how to change oil in his first car, helping Mrs. Wilson install a security system after a scare with a prowler, giving the mail carrier advice on buying his first motorcycle. And at the center of it all was Lena, a bridge between worlds that had once seemed unbridgeably distant. On a particularly warm Saturday in July, as Lena sat in her porch swing watching children, including Lily, play a chaotic game of tag across her front yard, Beth's car pulled into the driveway. She'd finally made good on her promise to visit. Lena watched her daughter's face as she took in the scene. Bikers grilling hamburgers, neighbors chatting casually with club members, children darting between adults without fear or hesitation. "Mom," Beth said as she climbed the porch steps. Confusion clear in her voice. "What is all this?" Before Lena could answer, Lily came running up, her face flushed with excitement. "Are you Lena's daughter?" she asked, breathless. "Your mom is the best. She's teaching me to make cookies and she comes to all my dance shows and Daddy says she's the queen of the whole club now." Beth looked at her mother with new eyes as Doug approached, offering a hand and a cold drink. "Your mom saved my family," he said simply. "Now we're just returning the favor." Later that evening, after most guests had gone home, Lena and Beth sat together on the porch swing. The sound of crickets filled the summer air, punctuated occasionally by laughter from the few club members still lingering in the backyard. "I get it now," Beth said quietly. "Why you let them in that first night. Why you keep letting them in." Lena smiled, watching the fireflies begin to rise from the grass. "Sometimes the most important thing we can do is open our door when someone knocks," she said. "Even when we're afraid. Especially when we're afraid." In the driveway, Doug was showing Lily how to catch fireflies in her cupped hands. The big, tough biker crouched down to his daughter's level, his face gentle in the fading light. "Look at what grew from one night's kindness," Lena whispered, more to herself than to her daughter. "Just look at what we built together." And as darkness settled fully over the neighborhood, the porch light she'd once been too afraid to fix now shone brightly, a beacon guiding people home to a place where judgments were left at the door, and only the warmth of unexpected family remained.